You wouldn't survive a day, the Middle Ages. We usually picture noble knights, fair ladies, and tournaments. Well, maybe the plague too. But the true day-to-day reality of those times was so wild, cruel, and absurd that a modern person wouldn't last more than a few days. And it's not about wars or famine. It's that reality itself was saturated with madness. Today, I'll tell you about 5 things that prove history textbooks bashfully skip over a whole lot. We're going down into the darkest, most ridiculous, and most terrifying corners of the past. From animal trials to exploding cemeteries, you wouldn't survive a day in that era. Let's go.
Fact 5. The Trial of the Pigs, or How Medieval Justice Worked for Animals. Picture this scene. A town square. A crowd of onlookers has gathered. The executioner on the scaffold is soaping up the rope, and standing next to him is a pig. Dressed in a human doublet and breeches, it has just had its sentence read aloud, and now it will be hanged for murder. This isn't a scene from a surreal horror film. This was a real legal practice that existed in Europe for centuries. Sounds like nonsense? But in the Middle Ages, animals were full subjects of the law. If a pig mauled a child or caused injury, it was arrested, put in a regular jail cell, appointed a public defender, and given a full trial, with witness interrogations, arguments from both sides, and court costs. The bills have survived. In 1457 in Burgundy, a pig was tried for the murder of a 5-year-old boy. A receipt has been preserved. 6 sous for the pig's upkeep in prison, 3 sous for the executioner who brought it from the village, and 10 sous for the carpenter who built the gallows. The total cost of the proceedings was about 30 sous. That was the price of a decent suit at the time. Moreover, before the execution, the pig was dressed in human clothes to observe some sort of ritual. The executioner was paid as much for killing an animal as for killing a human. And this didn't only apply to pigs. Horses were tried for throwing their riders, roosters for allegedly laying an egg. It was believed a basilisk would hatch from such an egg. Rats and locusts were excommunicated from the church and summoned to court via notices posted on house walls. Madness? Absolutely. But there was a twisted, logical foundation for it. Church lawyers, the Glossators, reasoned thus: if God created animals to serve man, then violating this order is a sin, and sin must be punished. It doesn't matter whether the defendant has a soul. A modern person can only guess. Was it a total religious worldview, or the fact that people simply couldn't accept the chaos of random death? If a pig killed a child, it's a terrifying, senseless tragedy. But if the pig is tried and hanged, then justice triumphs. An orderly, understandable hell is always cozier than incomprehensible chaos. Fact number 4. The arsenic fashion, or how an emerald dress slowly killed its owner. Let's move to the 19th century. Not quite the Middle Ages, but this is when something happened that people gladly attribute to the Dark Ages. Victorian England, high society, balls, candles, crinolines. Picture a beautiful lady in a luxurious emerald dress. It shimmers under the gaslight, drawing every gaze. She is the queen of the ball. She smells of death, literally, because that stunning green color came from a dye called Paris green, or scientifically, copper arsenite. The base is pure arsenic. This pigment was invented in the late 18th century, and by the mid-19th, it had taken over the world. It dyed not just ball gowns, but also wallpaper, artificial flowers, children's toys, lampshades, and even candy. Imagine the scale of it: a room papered in green, arsenic-laden wallpaper. In dry weather, it was manageable. But in the damp London climate, or when the fireplaces were lit, the wallpaper began to emit volatile arsenic compounds. Inhabitants complained of nausea, headaches, weakness, and a strange garlicky smell in the house.
but doctors just shrugged and called it melancholy or bad blood. Entire families slowly died in their living rooms, breathing poison from the walls. But the worst horror concerned women. To make a dress rustle and sparkle, it was liberally dusted with arsenite powder. As she moved, it dispersed into the air. The lady inhaled poison all evening long. Plus, the skin, it also absorbed a dose of the toxin. Symptoms of poisoning, hair loss, ulcers, a greenish tint to the skin, and ultimately death, were dismissed as consumption and fashionable pallor. Even more terrible was the plight of the seamstresses and dressmakers. They sat in cramped workshops, inhaling arsenic dust from the fabrics for hours. The mortality rate among them was colossal. Their hands became covered in dreadful ulcers, and they began vomiting blood. They died in terrible agony, often before reaching the age of 25. Did people know about this? Yes. Manufacturers and doctors knew, but it was incredibly profitable. Bright green was a status symbol. A callous disregard for the lives of the lower class and the vanity of the aristocracy created an industry of legal murder. Arsenic was everywhere. Entering a fashionable drawing room in the 1850s was literally more dangerous than standing under gunfire.
Fact 3. The tragedy of Semmelweis, or why doctors refuse to wash their hands. Now I will tell you perhaps the most tragic and outrageous medical story of the 19th century. It's about how doctors killed patients by the tens of thousands, all the while considering themselves insulted when someone suggested they simply wash their hands. The setting is the Vienna General Hospital, 1846. 2 maternity wards. The first is for training male doctors, the second for female midwives. The statistics were staggering. In the first ward, staffed by doctors, up to 25 to 30% of mothers died of childbed fever. In the midwives' ward, just 2 to 4%. Women begged on their knees not to be sent to the doctor's ward. They knew ending up there was an almost guaranteed death sentence, and no one could figure out the cause. They argued about miasmas, bad air, the constitution of the patients. And then, a young doctor from Hungary appears, Ignaz Semmelweis. He was meticulous. He noticed one strange thing. All the doctors started their day with morning rounds in the autopsy room. They dissected the corpses of women who had died of the fever, studied the pus, the entrails, touched everything with their bare hands. And then, after casually rinsing their hands with water or simply wiping them on their coats, they went to the maternity ward to deliver babies. Semmelweis suspected that cadaverous particles were being carried on their hands. Today, we call this cadaveric poison bacteria and sepsis. He introduced a strict rule. Before delivering a baby, everyone must wash their hands with a solution of chlorinated lime. The result? The mortality rate in his ward plummeted from 18% to 1%, almost to zero. He saved hundreds of lives in a few months. The proof was irrefutable. And do you know how the medical community reacted? The doctors were mortally offended. How dare this upstart suggest that a gentleman's hands could be dirty? This is not a joke. This was the literal position of the medical luminaries of the time. Germ theory didn't exist yet, and the idea that a doctor could carry death on his hands seemed humiliating. Semmelweis was subjected to relentless persecution. He was fired from the Vienna hospital. He was banned from publishing in leading journals. He moved to Budapest and continued to prove his case, but no one listened. He began writing angry, open letters to his colleagues, calling them murderers. What did his colleagues do?
they declared him insane. He was lured to Vienna under the pretext of a consultation and locked away in a mental asylum. There, he tried to escape. He was brutally beaten by the orderlies, who inflicted wounds. The wounds festered. And on August 14, 1865, Ignaz Semmelweis died in the madhouse from the very sepsis he had saved his patients from. He was 47 years old. Only decades later would Pasteur and Koch lay the foundations of microbiology, and doctors grudgingly begin to wash their hands. But the death toll of medical arrogance was already in the hundreds of thousands.
Fact 2. The Dancing Plague of 1518, or the Devil's Disco to the Death. July 1518. The city of Strasbourg, Holy Roman Empire. Sweltering heat. On one of the narrow, winding streets, a woman appears. Her name is Frau Trophäa. She steps out of her house and begins to dance. No music, no festival. She just jerks, twirls, and cannot stop. At first, passers-by laugh. Then they go home. Night falls. The woman is still dancing. Morning. She is still dancing. Her feet are bloodied and raw, her clothes filthy, her eyes glazed over, but she continues. After 3 days, 6 more people join her. A week later, there are 30. By the end of the month, about 400 people were dancing non-stop in the streets of Strasbourg. This is documented in chronicles, apothecary bills, and court records. This isn't a legend. It's a historical fact. People danced without a break for days on end. Legs swelled up and turned black. Strokes and heart attacks occurred. Exhausted, they would drop dead right on the cobblestones, but then get up again, if they found the strength, and continue their jerking motions. The city authorities were in a panic. What was this? The curse of St. Vitus? Mass insanity? Ergot poisoning? Ergot is a fungus that causes convulsions, but victims lie in spasms. They don't dance for days. The burgomaster and the city council convened an emergency meeting. The physicians of the time gave a diagnosis: hot blood. And do you know what solution they came up with? The most absurd and cruel one possible. They thought, since people want to dance, we must let them dance this contagion out of their systems. And they hired an orchestra. Drums, trumpets, and violins came out to the central square and began to play. They calculated that the crowd would get into the rhythm, exhaust themselves in a day, and go home. But the effect was the opposite. The rhythm only spurred the crowd on. The number of dancers tripled. The death toll skyrocketed. Dozens of people perished at this devil's disco from exhaustion and heart failure. Eventually, the authorities realized their mistake and took a different path. They banned all music, forbade bright colors and games of chance, and had the sick carted to the chapel of St. Vitus, where they were fitted with red shoes, sprinkled with holy water, and marked with a cross on their foreheads. Gradually, the epidemic subsided as mysteriously as it had begun. So, what was it really? Modern science leans towards mass psychogenic illness. Commonly, it's called mass hysteria. Imagine the context: a recent famine, fear of syphilis, total religiosity, and a belief in curses. One severe psychosis is enough, and a wave sweeps through the crowd. The dancing plague of 1518 isn't the only case, but it is the most massive and mysterious collective psychosis in human history. One that today looks like a horror movie. Fact 1. Exploding cemeteries, or when vaults had one unpleasant problem: which was discreetly hushed up in polite society. The city was overpopulated, not only by the living, but also by the dead. Traditionally, the English buried their deceased in enclosed lead or stone vaults, beneath church floors and in small churchyards. The corpse was placed in a wooden coffin. The coffin was placed in a stone or lead sarcophagus and hermetically sealed. It was believed this protected the body from desecration and didn't trouble the living with odor. But you can't fool physics. Inside this hermetic container, the process of anaerobic decomposition began. Bacteria consumed the tissues, releasing vast amounts of methane, carbon dioxide, and hydrogen sulfide. Imagine, inside a stone box lies a corpse. It bloats. The gas pressure inside the sarcophagus grows to an enormous level. Sometimes, the coffin would literally burst from within, and fluids would begin to seep through the cracks in the church floor. Parishioners complained of the unbearable stench of the devil during Sunday services. But that was minor. When the pressure became critical, the vaults exploded, literally detonated from the inside. Stone walls blew out, scattering decomposed remains everywhere. Imagine the horror of the cemetery watchman who hears a dull thud at night and, rushing to the spot, sees a shattered tomb and scattered human bones. The fireman called to extinguish such fires simply shrugged and recorded the cause as spontaneous explosion of a burial. The scale was so appalling that in the mid-19th century, the British Parliament passed emergency laws. The famous Magnificent Seven giant cemeteries outside the city limits, like Highgate, were created. But even there, out of inertia, people continued building hermetic vaults, and explosions occasionally happened right up to the early 20th century. The darkest detail. When a vault was opened after an explosion to rebury the remains, workers often lost consciousness from the accumulated cadaverous gases and fell right in, adding their own bodies to the communal grave. It was a closed circle of death and decay, hidden beneath the respectable facade of Victorian morality. Conclusion: a survival horror of stupidity and pride. So, there you have it. Trials of pigs, poisonous dresses, killer doctors, crowds dancing to their deaths, and cemeteries that exploded. We are used to thinking of the past as something romantic or heroic, but real history is an endless survival horror of stupidity and pride. The next time you feel like dreaming about how cool it would be to be born in the Victorian era or the Middle Ages, just remember, you most likely wouldn't have survived even the first week. Thank you for being with me. If this text made you want to urgently wash your hands or air out the room, then I've done everything right. Subscribe, hit like, and share this video with those who also think history is boring.